Yeah, I'm sitting here with Oren Franks, and I think this is I hope I can convince you that there will be some sort of answer to mental health in a virtual way. So today we're talking to Oren about your company. Can you just briefly introduce it in the simplest form what your company does?
Yeah, so our company's name is Talkspace. Basically, it's a way to democratize mental health. Our vision is to provide mental health to 1 billion people in need around the world. And I think the context for why Talkspace exists is the state of society. 1 in 5 people around the world suffer from a mental health issue every year, diagnosable one, which amounts roughly to 1.5 billion people. And I think the best word to describe it is a global disgrace, in which the lack of service, lack of help for those people is pretty evident. In the United States, where we mainly focus, around 1/3 of the people that are being referred to a therapist are receiving any form of help. So the amount of damage, as described both in pain and in financial damage, it's just a global catastrophe.
So, okay, so I'm a data journalist, but let's say I'm a startup founder like you. I'm out there somewhere. You said to me in the background, like a lot of startup founders actually using the service because they don't have time. They text their therapist on the go, on the plane, or anywhere else really. Is that really the use case? Or I'm like sitting in a bar, I have a little bit of a nervous breakdown, I'm texting my therapist and I get something back immediately? Is that the future?
So if we go back a little, the barriers to why people do not use therapy are threefold. First and foremost, it's very expensive. It's a product for the 1%. You need to pay between $5,000 and $15,000 for a full treatment course. Second, despite this being almost 2016, it's still stigma and shame and intimidation. And third, which you mentioned, is accessibility. How do you find the right therapist? How do you do the qualitative match to a therapist? And how long does it take you to actually find an appointment and sit and meet the guy or the woman? Usually in the United States, around 3 weeks. What we basically did, what Talkspace done, has moved therapy to a messaging platform, an asynchronous messaging platform, text messaging, audio messaging, and video messaging, and got rid of the notion of a session. So when you join Talkspace, you talk to a consultation therapist, you're being matched to a therapist that will answer your needs in probably 2 to 3 minutes. And then you buy a currency or a unit of a week or a month or a quarter in which you can in an unlimited manner message with your therapist. That's the modality that we do. What it does is threefold. First, because the time units that match between the provider and the patient time are much smaller, we are capable to reduce the cost massively. And typically a week of unlimited messaging therapy will be $25, which is less than the copay if your insurance company will ever bother reimbursing you in the United States. The second thing it does, because it's remote and it's in writing and we allow anonymity, it completely removes the stigma and the shame, and people are much more open and they talk about their really issues much quicker. And last but not least, it takes 3 minutes to get matched to a therapist and typically an hour or 2 to start treatment. And it becomes a very intensive, frequent modality of treatment. People will typically speak with the therapist 1 to 3 times a day. Very high engagement, very contextual. If some of you are in the audience now using Talkspace, you can actually text your therapist right now, which is, this guy on the stage is speaking bullshit, very boring. You'll get an answer in an hour and 3 hours. You don't have to wait until next Wednesday at 3 p.m. for your next session. So in a sense, we're only using people that are professional, face-to-face, experienced therapists that typically have done face-to-face therapy for 10 years. We're just distributing it in a manner which is much more in line with the way we live today. It's very convenient, and all of you know how to use it. That's Talkspace, if you will.
So walk me through a little bit the process. If let's say I'm just joining your service, I have nervous breakdowns or some sort of issue with that. What do I need to do? Isn't one of the criticism you get that it's not so personal?
Yeah.
How do I get to know that other person on the other side, wherever that person may be, and consult me? Is there a period, in a couple of days, I can sort of talk with that person? Like, walk me through how actually I, as a person, trust that other person on the other line.
Right. So the success of treatment in psychotherapy is predicated upon creating a relationship, engagement, attachment between a therapist, a singular therapist, it's always the same therapist, and a patient. The way you measure it is something called WAI, which is the Working Alliance survey or outcome measure, which measures the quality and the intensity of the relationship between a patient and a therapist. And the way technically works is, as I mentioned, you start your conversation with a consultation therapist that uses a very specific algorithm to match the right therapist for you out of a few hundred therapists that are our network. The quality of the match is extremely important. Once you start treatment with your matched therapist, which we call the primary therapist, it's very, very similar to traditional therapy. It's just done in messaging. Could be text, could be audio, and if the therapist thinks that it's important, they will do a video. Managing relationship via digital devices is something that we do very intuitively today, and it's a part of our lives. But more specific, we like to measure everything. We work through evidence-based treatment. And the quality of the attachment, the relationship, is exactly the same as in traditional face-to-face therapy. Is it the same modality? No, it's very, very different. And personally, by the way, I've been to face-to-face therapy for over a decade. It's a wonderful product. I think anyone that can use it should use it. But saying that it's competitive to our modality, it's not. It's just very different. And saying you should only, since the efficacy is exactly the same, saying you should only do face-to-face therapy, which obviously some of the more experienced or, in plain words, older therapists say you should only go to face-to-face therapy, it's a little bit like saying, I have to get back to New York tomorrow, so I have only two choices. I'll either use a private jet or I'll swim, because commercial airlines is just not good enough. So I agree, private jets are great, it's just that humanity can't really afford it, so you might as well take commercial airlines. Again, with the scale in mind, which is how do we get help to 1 billion people that have no access to it, this modality is exactly as efficacious as traditional face-to-face therapy. It's about 3 to 4 times more efficient in cost and in money, and it's scalable and manageable via data. So for us, this fulfills our vision.
So for the mental health patient, well, for the person who engages, right? You're doing this service like now, 18 months? What did you learn about the patient? Like, what are the patterns that are normally text in the morning? How can you improve the communication between the therapist and the patient?
So the thing about, if you try and use Talkspace, what you see is the tip of the iceberg, which is the consumer side or the front end for the user or the patient, but it's a very tiny segment of the product. Most of the product that we build is a scalable system to manage the quality of the care and of the therapist on the supply side, because our product is the therapist. So what we build are 3 measures. One is we use outcome measures as part of the platform. So Talkspace is also a research platform. We know exactly how every patient is doing at every point in the course of their treatment. And we can actually feed it back to the therapist saying, all right, Ben, you're a great therapist. You're treating general anxiety disorder fantastically well. You're scoring at 120%. But when treating OCD, you're less good. Why don't you speak to those 2 therapists that are working with us that are very good at OCD, and they will show you and train you and guide you. The second thing we do, we have a supervision structure, which are more senior therapists that are actually looking at the treatment rooms of the patients. And last but not least, we regressed what the optimal engagement patterns are, and we can guide the therapist in terms of SLAs, how many times they should write, or how many times they should use audio or video, what's the response time, and also what's the depth of the response, even in simple terms as how many characters they use. The outcome is, we believe that for the very first time, and we have treated 150,000 people up until today on Talkspace, is a fully managed, efficacy-driven product that's built for the therapist to be able to be the best therapist that they can be. Since we provide them with data-based feedback, we believe that their talents can be leveraged and used in a much better way by working at Talkspace than in any other modality.
Is it hard for the therapist to adopt that model? Do you have no?
I'll caveat that, yes and no. If they're under 50, it's completely intuitive, just like all of us use this product. It's very, very intuitive. If they are a little more senior and experienced, also known as over 50, they will probably not be a good fit for us. But again, you have to understand, we have over 300 therapists on the network. None of them are our employees. No, all of them will typically have delivered traditional face-to-face therapy for at least 10 years. We find a very high correlation of experience to efficacy in this profession. They don't owe us anything, and they're very ethical, professional people, and they would have never done this if they didn't feel very comfortable clinically, ethically, and also in terms of convenience by doing that. So they're really our customers, the therapists.
Tell me a little bit about, like, you told me a little bit about IBM Watson. You using that now successfully in your product to make it better. Like, what's the whole story about IBM Watson?
So I'm a big believer in database management approach, and this is what we're trying to do here. And one of that is a partnership we signed with IBM, with Watson's. We're using some of their APIs around personality insights to actually build a clever algorithm to get a better qualitative match, which is basically create a fingerprint of the personality of the therapist and try and predict what personality structures will be a better match, regressed from efficacy, nothing else. So if this kind of therapist was very efficacious with those kind of personalities, we'll try and match it in the future. And a little more in the long term, we're actually doing a POC with the core Watson product, which is the QA one, which is trying to generate suggested answers to therapists driven by the millions of exchanges, pretty structured exchanges in forms of Q&A between therapists and patients. And maybe in 5 or 10 or 20 years, the grandson of Watson will be able to completely democratize therapy and deliver 60 or 70 or 80% of the efficacy via software. That will be a wonderful thing, because it will basically mean that some of this product can be free in the future and accessible and available for everyone around the world, which is exactly what we set out to do. Currently, it's a nice little science fiction experiment, which I like a lot, and I have very low expectations, but it's a very timid, small step into the future.
Well, let's say we'll be seeing next year. Maybe we can bring some results on that, and
I'll be happy to.
I hope you solve a lot of problems for these people. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.